Good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. We continue with the final panel of this conference on transformative power of economic democracy. And I welcome all panelists, including the President of the European Economic and Social Committee. I already mentioned in the morning that you would join us. And indeed, it's very happy to see you. I'm happy to see you all. Because now we need to discuss what we do with all this knowledge and how we ensure that there is a policy process which picks up the ball and runs with it, and then we see what we can do in practice. Let me introduce everyone. I already mentioned that we have Oliver Röpke with us, who is the President of the Economic and Social Committee. He actually joined the committee in 2009. Yes. And ever since, he has been engaged in many reports and very important policy action, and indeed assumed the presidency recently. And we meet him on many occasions when it comes to social Europe and the pillar of the social rights and its implementation. So I think the role of the committee is also very important in this transition period when there is a new parliament, a new commission, and it's important that the key messages are delivered to the right place and ensure that the social agenda of the new EU leadership remains at least as strong as in the previous one, despite all the political adversity, because there is a lot. Then I would like to go to my right. Graça Fonseca comes from Portugal, and you were Minister of Culture and former State Secretary for Administrative Modernization of Portugal. I had to read it because it's a long title, but she's known in Portugal as a thinker, but also a doer, somebody who has been contributing to the debates, but also had many opportunities to turn the idea of a social economy or a democratic economy into practice. And then we have a new member of the European Parliament, Idoia Mendia, who recently was elected. Congratulations on your election to the European Parliament. You come from Spain, more precisely the Basque Country, and we will obviously count on you on many similar occasions to discuss the Basque experience, because the Basque Country is one of the classic case studies of the social economy in Europe, and we will be eager to hear your thoughts about this agenda and the topics of today's discussion. And then we have Ruth Paserman, who is Director for Funds, Programming and Implementation, DG Employment, European Commission. Welcome, Ruth, to this discussion. You know, Ruth has had many different positions beforehand, including in the cabinet of Marianne Thyssen, the previous Commissioner for Employment, Social Affairs, Skills, and there was something else.
No, I think she was only like this. Social inclusion.
Mobility?
Social
Mobility?
Mobility? No, maybe.
The title always changes. What I'm sure is that the social rights was just recently included in the title of the commissioner. It was not there before. And of course, it's an open question whether it stays the same way or not. Of course, what we discuss is not the title, but actually the perspective on the social economy from the point of view of DG Employment, which has many connecting points and potentially also tools to promote such an agenda. And last but not least, we have Diana Dovgan on the left, who is Secretary General at the European Confederation of Industrial and Social Cooperatives Europe. And when we first met, you were also in the same position already. And
Not exactly, but
the same organization. But indeed, you have been ensuring that the voice of the cooperatives is heard in Brussels and taken into account in the discussions, whether it comes to social questions or economic questions or the connection between the two. Since we only have 1 hour for this discussion, I prepared some guiding questions to everybody. And I would ask all panelists to reply to these questions in a focused manner, and then we will have some time also for the interactive discussion afterwards. Panelists will have an opportunity to ask questions from each other, and then we can, if we are lucky, also open the floor to the audience as well. If you allow me, I start with the President of the Economic and Social Committee. And indeed, I would like to convey the question which I heard from some of you in the break of this program, how we go from theory to practice. What is the plan? What is the master plan for feeding into the political cycle the very important output of public deliberations, consultative processes? What is the method to ensure that there is at the end some form of practical policy measure, step, legislation, which helps promoting this part of the EU social dimension? What's your perspective from the European Economic and Social Committee?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much, László, also for the invitation to speak in this partnership event. I think it's an excellent opportunity, at least for us, and we are very happy to do this together with FEPS and also with Open Society Foundations. Because if you discuss, and I saw that this was on the agenda, question of democratization, question of citizens' involvement, participation of civil society in decision-making process. I think indeed this House is the best place to do this as House of Organized Civil Society, and therefore I'm grateful that you organize this event here in our House, because I think we live already in our work the involvement of civil society in formulating policy recommendations when we try to get not only involved in the decision-making process, but to be a crucial part of it. I think this is of utmost importance, and I will come back to this a bit later, but I think that this committee plays an important role, but I think we can redouble our efforts, and we can even play a more important role. And you ask also for somehow formalization of some structures, and I think we have also some ideas how we can strengthen this civil society engagement through the network that our 329 members have in their member states. I will be very open. I think nobody can claim that he or she organizes each and every part of civil society with 329 members, but I would say that we have here a strong coverage of important social partners and civil society organizations, and the task is actually for us now, and this is also part of my program during this mandate, to open the doors, to make our committee even more inclusive, more representative, in order to have really this strong voice in the decision-making process. And you ask for the master plan. The master plan maybe has to wait still a bit, but I think we have some good ideas from our side. And I would recommend also to have a look in our manifesto that we published at the beginning of my mandate, where we outlined some of the ideas how to make the voice of civil society here stronger, and how to make this House more representative and more inclusive, more vibrant. And I think after 1 year there are already first results and fruits of this strategy. But allow me to take a closer look into some specific topics where I see that especially economic democracy could be strengthened also via recommendations from our House, because economic democracy, and I think this was discussed already in the morning here, is definitely already an important cornerstone in our activity as EESC. And here, for example, I would like to mention that we are currently working on an own initiative opinion on enhancing fiscal transparency through participatory budgeting in the EU. This will be adopted in October this year, and this opinion will touch upon many elements that have been discussed here today. As you say, also in your concept note, many elements that have been, or let's say democracy in public spending is one element of economic democracy, and the work on this opinion is currently ongoing. Ideas still need to be discussed, but there are already important aspects that could feed into our discussion. And one of the main ideas is that increasing public participation in budgeting is crucial in order to make transparency a reality. And we think that participatory budgeting is a powerful tool that can increase transparency and accountability in public spending. The EU could therefore encourage more member states to adopt participatory budgeting and provide support to those that are already implementing it. And also we think that the EU should prioritize engaging young people in participatory budgeting processes, as they are the future stakeholders and decision makers. And this could be achieved by developing youth-friendly digital platforms and tools for participatory budgeting, conducting targeted outreach and awareness-raising campaigns to inform and engage young people. I have to say, engagement and involvement of young people is also a cornerstone of our and my political priorities here in the House. I believe that making young people involved in budgeting is a needed step to create a sense of ownership from our youth in the political process and decision making. Another point I would like to touch upon is the topic of cohesion policy, because this is also a point where we here in the House put a lot of emphasis in the last years, and especially in this mandate. We had a very close relationship with the Belgian presidency and also with Commissioner Ferreira, because I think that cohesion policy, if you read also the recent articles, is currently under scrutiny. The future of cohesion policy, it's also under threat, especially with the rise of populist parties, right-wing parties, and the criticism of EU bureaucracy. And I think this this requires even more a strong voice from civil society, but also from all progressive political forces to defend this concept. Because from our point of view, cohesion policy is really, we always say this, the glue that keeps Europe united. But I think we should not allow that cohesion policy will be transformed in an instrument that only supports competitiveness or a special understanding and definition of competitiveness. I think it shouldn't be. In order to cohesion policy, to strengthen cohesion policy and to make sure that the participatory aspect of cohesion policy could be strengthened, we are convinced that our committee and also the Committee of Regions should be strongly involved in shaping the cohesion policy. That was the case in the last, at least in the last 1.5 years. I can confirm that we were involved by Commissioner Ferreira, and we also presented the high-level report on the future of cohesion policy in one of our plenary sessions, and I think this is of utmost importance. But we still see that in many cases the involvement of social partners and of civil society is lacking. It's lacking at European level, but also at national level. It is often even marginal, and this needs to change. We believe that civil society will need to play a critical and substantial role here, and therefore we must enhance the so-called partnership principle. We recently also sent a letter to the political groups in the parliament to warn that cohesion policy should not be watered down. We need a strong commissioner with a whole portfolio for cohesion policy. I think this is absolutely important to develop our regions and to fight social and territorial inequalities. And once again, I think cohesion policy should be an illustration of participatory democracy, so we need to work so it better includes civil society and social partners in its implementation. There's another point which is close to my heart, but I think it was already discussed before. This is, of course, democracy at work, democratization of work, but I think it can be highlighted one more time, and I think democracy at work is at the a cornerstone of our democratic system. I think democracy should not stop at the entrance of enterprises. On the contrary, I think representation, works councils, including European works councils, should be really an integral part of our social and economic model. And I think we all agree, and this might be highlighted already before, that many, many studies show that enterprises with participation systems, with workers' participation, with co-decision procedures normally perform better than others. At least they are not an obstacle, and I think they are not a disadvantage when it comes to competitiveness. Therefore, we were really happy and glad that the Spanish presidency, and I have to say the Spanish presidency, asked us for an exploratory opinion how to strengthen democracy at work across Europe. And I would like to highlight that it was the Spanish presidency, because I still remember from my time as trade unionist that this was often considered as a German, Austrian, maybe Nordic model, this workers' participation. I think we made some progress here. It was the Spanish government that asked us to develop and elaborate on some guidelines, and they were also discussed, and I think they were even included in some council conclusions. So I think this was a major step forward, and I hope that in the new mandate we will not stop when it comes to the implementation of the social pillar. I hear here and there tendencies also in the strategic agenda that the further implementation of the pillar could create some resistance, but I think we shouldn't stop. We have to move forward. I think the pillar, we made a lot of progress with the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights, but I think there's a lot of things still to do, and I think democracy at work is one of the points, because democracy in the world of work depends on cooperation in the end of all stakeholders, especially when we are facing the green and digital transition. And I would make it even broader, democracy at work. I would include the whole question of collective bargaining. And here we have a very good starting point with the so-called minimum wage directive, which gives actually an instrument to member states and to social partners to work as a game changer, to put again civil society stakeholders, and in this case, of course, social partners, in place, and to strengthen them when it comes to the working conditions and especially to the wage setting. This was something where we did not put enough emphasis in the last years. On the contrary, during the financial crisis, even on the contrary, we dismantled a lot of collective bargaining systems. And I'm glad that with Commissioner Nicola Schmidt, but also with the whole Commission and also the Commission President, we go now hopefully in the different and opposite direction. But I think this has to be accomplished and has to be developed also at national level, because let me say it's not simply not acceptable that we have member states with a collective bargaining coverage rate of 10%. I think this is, from an economic, from a social point of view, but also from a democratic point of view, simply not acceptable. And therefore, I think it was really time that also Europe took some action. And finally, on a more societal level, democracy in our societies can also be strengthened by improving the dialogue with organizations that represent citizens. And it's time to implement. This is something we always say here in the House. It's really time to implement Article 11 of the treaty and strengthen civil dialogue at EU level. And I think that our committee is really the best place to organize this. I have to say we did a lot to move forward with this agenda, to democratize also this decision-making process here in our House, or with the help of our House. And we started by opening, as I said, opening our doors to make the committee more representative. We are now the first EU institution that applies the EU youth test, which means that structurally we involve youth organizations in shaping some of our key opinions. So young representatives take part in our discussions. They can make comments, they can make proposals, they can take part in our hearings. Basically, they can do what our members do, without voting rights, of course. But I think it's a major step forward to make this committee more inclusive and to give young people here a strong voice. And I'm happy that the Commission is now following up on this. I had a meeting with Commissioner Ivanova and with the youth check, I think they call it, but it seems that our youth test could serve also as a best practice and as an example for this. The second point I wanted to mention, even if I come from the unions and I'm a strong believer in strong social dialogue, I'm convinced that there's no contradiction between social dialogue and civil dialogue. And especially in this house where we have all the three groups, also civil society organizations, we have organized this year for the first time ever a fully fledged civil society week with a lot of initiatives that we had at several places here in the house. We put them together, and one of the most important thing was to organize a civil society panel with a lot of representatives from civil society organizations, including youth organizations, and they formulated recommendations. I think it was about 30 recommendations for the new parliament, for the new commission. And we presented this to the commission, and currently we are working on our own resolution here in the House, but we will take this into consideration, and I cannot promise that we will take everything on board, but some of them definitely. And one of the recommendations, and I think this is also remarkable, is or comes from the field of democratizing economic policy making, for example, in the European semester. And here we are of the opinion, and also the Civil Society Week is of the opinion, that this European semester must be reformed to broadly involve civil society and citizens in a meaningful and structured way. And we are convinced that the EU should widen the spectrum of involved actors in the consultative mechanisms of the European semester, starting from social partners to a broad variety of civil society organizations. So this is not yet the master plan, but I think some pieces which could be included in such a master plan, I think, are on the table from our committee, and we are happy to discuss further with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was really comprehensive, and I think there are many, many points which could kind of kick off a separate discussion. I'm grateful for the comments on the merits of the Spanish presidency. My follow-up question a little bit later will be about your expectations regarding the Hungarian presidency. But before coming to this, I think let's give the floor to all the panelists, first of all. And my preference would be to continue with the Commission and to ask Ruth regarding the capacity or the potential of the Commission and specifically the DG Employment in supporting the initiatives and the policies around the social economy and the democratization of the economy. I think the support is a key word. When it comes to this, I think also scaling up is another key word, how to ensure that such initiatives or seeds of a new model can be scaled up, and resources, of course, when it comes to the European Union. The President also was mentioning the importance of cohesion, and I think this is also something which we have been working a lot in the last 1 year, and I'm sure there will be many interesting twists in this debate in the coming period. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, László. Indeed, well, thank you for inviting me here. I'm very honored, and I'll try to my best to cover all the initiatives of the Commission, but I won't, because already I don't know about the youth test, or how you want to call it. I mean, I'd heard about it, but I didn't know it was going to be. Anyway, I think it's a very good idea. Of course, I have been working quite a lot, me and my colleagues, on the issue of social economy, starting with the problem of a definition, because things are always defined in different ways. So what we have come up with is that we consider social economy enterprises that put people or social or environmental purpose before profit. That reinvest most of the profits or surpluses to carry out activities in the interest of their members or users or societies at large, and that they operate with democratic or participatory governance. And in this frame, so this is the definition we have used for the social economy. And this way, the social economy is actually putting into practice the foundational principles of economic democracy, aims at giving individuals and communities a voice, and to enable them to take control through democratic and participatory governance practices. There are the study that was the basis of the event today shows a lot of examples of models of shared ownership, of cooperatives, of way in which things can be organized. Now, all of this exists for already some time. The European Commission worked quite a lot up to December 21 with when we came out with a social economy action plan. And this social economy action plan is a very wide-ranging vision on how we can help social economy entities expand. I mean, basically, this model expand throughout Europe. You have to understand that in some countries, notably Spain, there's like 10% of employment is from social economy. But in other countries, there's nearly nothing. So our goal was really to expand the best practices that exist across Europe, throughout Europe. And the main instrument that we think is very important is that we proposed a council recommendation on developing social economy framework conditions. So basically asking member states to look at the good practices, change their laws and regulations, and in a way to create an enabling framework that can allow social economy entities to thrive. This recommendation was adopted by the Council in November 23, and now we're at the implementations phase. We've actually done quite a few mutual learning events where the good examples that exist in different member states are shown, and there's a discussion how to do a strategy, how to involve different services, because it is not actually an employment issue necessarily. In some countries this is based in the enterprise ministry, in some countries it's very much focused about work integration enterprises, so it's very much linked to employment and social affairs. So there are different models, and it is useful to really to showcase examples how you can have different ministries working together, whether it makes sense to have a national framework law or a regional framework law according to the way competencies are organized in the countries. So basically, we are now at the phase of guiding or pushing member states to actually come up with a framework, enabling framework for social economy enterprise entities. And we think this is really fundamental for the future also. I mean, really, it's creating the conditions to allow this model of operating to continue working. Okay, this is not the only tool, as you mentioned. There's certainly two other things I should talk about. One is the issue of capacity building, and one is the issue of funding. As far as capacity building is concerned, so if you want these discussions with the member states is a sort of capacity building, mutual learning, we call it, between member states on the issue of social economy. But we've also invested quite substantially on capacity building within the cohesion policy. So cohesion policy in the social fund the European Social Fund is part of the cohesion funds, and it can finance capacity building in the member states, notably for social partners. And this is happening. I mean, there's quite a lot of money that has been allocated to by member states to this end, 770 million in the period 21-27. That comes up to more than 1 billion if you also take into account that there has to be co-financing from the member states. So and all member states need to allocate an appropriate amount to capacity building of social partners and civil society. And some member states are practically obliged, the ones that have received country-specific recommendations in the framework of the European semester, exactly on this, because there is a need to strengthen the capacity of the social partner and civil society actors. On top of this, this is, I mean, apart from the money, it is a general principle, I think it was mentioned already before, general principle of cohesion policy to have a partnership, which means that there is a consultation and strong involvement of the social partners and the relevant civil society organizations in the programming, in the implementation, and in the monitoring of all the programs linked to cohesion policy. This is summarized, I mean, how do you say, not summarized is not the right word, enshrined in a code of conduct on partnership, which indeed is exactly about how to involve and to make sure that social partners and civil society organizations are involved in the programming, implementation, and management and monitoring of the programs. And finally, perhaps still to continue on the issue of funding, there is also funding specifically for social economy entities or projects related to social economy coming from from Horizon, from various sources in Europe, as unfortunately this is how it is. There are lots of little bits all over the place. So there's something, of course, in Horizon Europe. There's something on Erasmus+, and there's also something in InvestEU. InvestEU, you know, is a demand-driven source of funding, managed, which is, it's not grants, it's lending or guarantees, so one applies through. Typically, it can. I mean, in the case of social economy entities, it would probably be through their banks, because the way it works is that basically subsidized loans or guarantees through implementing partners via the European Investment Fund. And we have an amount of 2.8 billion, which is for social infrastructure skills window, which includes a big part of microfinance. Actually, and this has been very, very much demanded, actually is oversubscribed as far as we stand now. It is exactly financing typically social economy entities. Okay, I think I stop there, but I have further things if you want to come back.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Indeed, there should be another round to add further points, maybe after questions. Let's move to the European Parliament. And indeed, to welcome Idoia Mendia as a new member. You come from the Basque Country. I had the opportunity in 2012 to visit Mondragon, which was mentioned several times in the discussion as a kind of remarkable example to which people pay a lot of attention. But I'm sure you have many other points from your experience, but maybe also your expectations regarding the role you can play in the EP. So please tell us about your thoughts.
First of all, for inviting me. Okay, thank you. Well, I just arrived to the European Parliament, and I have to thank you the invitation also, and I have to excuse my colleague Lina Calvet, who was the one who was invited at the beginning to this panel, but she's in Spain, so she asked me to be here. And on behalf of my experience in the Basque regional government as responsible of social economy specifically, and also the social dialogue, I try to focus and summarize a bit of my experience there. And my expectations here are big, but I know that it's going to be a difficult mandate, so I'm going to have the insight of a hard working ahead. No? So my political goal always has been quality employment and inclusive employment. And at the same time, my goal was also generate economic growth linked to the territory. And in the case of the social economy in the Basque Country, which, as you know, and as you mentioned, also is a successful historical experience, we created deeply rooted wealth and quality jobs based on the values of solidarity and participation. The companies we have in social economy in the Basque Country are really competitive, in their business, and they have a social dimension committed to its community. From an institutional perspective, which is mine in this case, having enterprises that are democratically managed and also sustainable over time with long-term business projects with a very high reinvestment quota is an extremely important question for us, because they are especially resilient in times of economic crisis, as we saw in the recent crisis, and they develop social cohesion through good jobs and equality. Due to all these reasons, the authorities in my region, we have a vision of social economy's reality and potential. There is a very committed relation between the authorities in the Basque Country and the social economy. For example, we explain the social economy and its history and the development in the Basque economy, not only the high schools, but also in the universities. And also we have started doing the same thing when people came to the public employment services because they want to start a business, and we advise them that there are other formulas of starting a company, not only the normal ones, but also the social economy. So there is a road to go there. As I said, we share also with the social agents in the Basque Country and with the political parties, inspired in the values of the social economy companies in the Basque Country, a new roadmap towards a new model of companies, a new culture for the companies, which would help to face today's challenges. And the main contents of this roadmap, which is agreed with not only with the social agents but also with the political parties in the Basque Country, I summarize some points of it. First, for example, is the management model that encourages participation day-to-day with transparency. The change in the company's management must be real and no cosmetic. Since the environment is very competitive, companies need to create sustainable and productive projects whose success depends on innovation and the people who make it possible. And that, of course, requires decent salaries, training, adherence to the project, conciliation, equality, and diversity. The change also must include understanding the objectives of the company in a broader way, not just the search for the maximum short-term benefit. It must also take into account ecological and human rights issues. The responsibility for change relies in everyone, but especially for those who run the company. These are some of the contents that the regional government is working on them collaboratively with social agents and by developing a pilot plan that deals with this new business culture, co-determination, which is inspiring the German model to apply in our factories. And also we are going to experiment the 4 days week. And all these issues for us are crucial to successfully address the challenge of the green and digital transition with social justice, but also to successfully face the crisis in the future. There will be many other issues to talk about, but I think that with this I could end with this point. For me, it's important to fuel these items of not only social economy, but also a new culture for the companies, which became then more participative and more competitive. And this would be my...
Thank you so much for this direct experience and report from the Basque Country. And now we go for another inspiration to Lisbon, but we remain on the Iberian Peninsula. And Graça Fonseca has been a promoter of many participatory projects and policies, including participatory budgeting. And maybe if you could give us an insight about how this is built and how do you assess the experience and what you bring from the Portuguese experience to the EU discussions. And I turn it to you.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. I'll try to keep it to my 6 minutes so that we have time for questions. So let me start by saying that I am a firm believer of the power of people, of the importance of not forgetting who elect us and who are we dependent on, and it's people, it's citizens, and we need to find a way to engage them. We need to find a way to make them closer to politics, either at local, national, or European level. And I really did spend part of my almost 25 years in politics finding ways to do it. I will focus on the participatory budget at the national level. Portugal was the first, and I think the only one still today country to experiment a participatory budget at the national level. So it was a difficult discussion with the Minister of Finance at that time, but we managed to do it. But actually I started to do it in Lisbon. I was deputy mayor of Lisbon for 6 years during the financial crisis, actually, 2009 to 2015. The mayor and after the prime minister were António Costa, the now president of the European Council. So I have to also mention that along the way, he was always a very strong supporter of participatory initiatives, and I hope that he brings that spirit to the European Council also. So it is my wish. When we started in Lisbon, we started in 2009, so we were in the middle of the financial crisis. It was a difficult time in Lisbon, in Portugal. Portugal was really impacted by the crisis. And the fact is that after 10 years, the Lisbon changed, and many of the changes were a result of people's participation. Most of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that now we see in Lisbon is a result of people's participation in participatory budget in Lisbon. Most of the, for instance, green structure of the city started in participatory budget in Lisbon. So it was a process that started slowly, but after 10 years, it really did change the face of the city in many, many, many places. And people were always augmenting the number of ideas that they proposed to the city, and the number of votes always augmented each year. So when I went into government in 2015, I had the commitment to try to see if it worked at the national level. We had no experience from other countries. There were no experience to learn from at that time. Still today, I think there is no other experiences. So we did learn on what we learned in Lisbon. So Lisbon is capital city. It's of course not as big as the country, but still it's a capital city with some density. And so we launched the Portugal participatory budget at the national level. What I want to share with you, maybe because there were some talks about participatory budget, I have no time to explain all the process, but I want to share with you 7 ideas that I bring with me from that experience that and maybe can be useful for the discussion and reflection about participatory budgets at the local or national or European level, who knows, someday. So first is engage all areas of government. Participatory budget is not a one-person thing, it's a government thing. It's something that has to be transversal to government, from education to environment, to economy, to tourism, to culture, to all areas have to be involved, because the idea is to take parts of their budget, their public budgets, to allocate to people's decision. So involve all areas of government, either at a local or national level, wherever all parts need to be involved. Second, and I heard this morning, make it also always deliberative, not consultative. If you make it just to consult people, people will not engage with that. People don't want just to be consulted, they want to decide. So you need to make the commitment that what they vote is what you make and what you make it happen. That's really, in my perspective, the most important principle of participatory budget. Third, be present. Show your political commitment in the process. For 2.5 years, I was running the country. We had this huge buzz with participatory budgets all over the place. And I went to almost 70 places in Portugal, listening to citizens and showing commitment. also brought the Prime Minister at that time to some of these local meetings. So it is important to show to people that you are not just doing for political marketing. You are doing it because you believe that it is important to engage people. If you don't do this, people will not engage in the process. 4, keep the commitment of implementing the most voted proposals. So in Portugal, it was deliberative. So the most voted proposals were implemented by governments. And we had the commitments that all the proposals that were voted by people would happen. And people would see the results. We need to make people realize that when they vote, something changes. Hopefully for the better. We are not seeing sometimes not for the better, but we need to make it for the better. So people need to think and to see and to realize that their hometown, where they propose something would change, they will see the results after and something has changed. 5, be transparent. Delays happen and you need to explain to people. You need to say to people, okay, yeah, we are late. We missed the dates of the implementing of this project. Explain to people that public procurement is tough, is difficult, sometimes is very bureaucratic, and we need to explain to people how things work in public sector. That's also a very good part of participatory budgeting, is explain to people how government works, how public services works, how institutions that sometimes are very opaque work. And you need to explain to them it is delayed because we had this problem, for instance, in the public procurement or something like that. 6, be creative, think outside the box. Engage youth associations, engage designers in thinking how can you make it more appealing for people to participate, to go there and to present their ideas and to vote. How can people vote? Because when you say to people that the most voted ideas will be implemented, people start to do something really interesting. They start campaigning. They understand why political parties do campaign. They understand that if they do not campaign, their ideas will not be a reality. So they start doing it. So it is very important to be creative and involve people to think outside the box. 7, and last, and I will stop here, always empower people to continue the work. One of the big issues of political initiatives is the changing of governments, of leaders, of political actors, and many times, at least in Portugal, the work that you start, the work that you develop, sometimes it goes out into the drain when you leave. So always be aware that you need to build ambassadors, people that feel that this is good for them, this is good for their lives, and they will continue your work even after you are no longer a political or leader in what you are doing. So this is my experience in Portugal, and to finish with, it was one of the most challenging projects I had, and it was the project probably where I learned a lot with people, and I went to places where a lot of people told me it is the first time that a person from government appears in my hometown, and it's the first time that someone asks my opinion about something, and it really is important to ask people's opinion and to make it then after opinion transformed into something that they understand that it's worth voting and it's worth participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these 7 magnificent principles. I think there are many also in Brussels who are not aware that participatory budgeting is such an important element of the socialist experience in Portugal, and we can do more to share this lesson. But let's complete the circle with Diana. And you represent the the cooperative movement, and I was just counting before and concluded that it's 180 years since the first declaration of the so-called Rochdale principles of the cooperative movement. So this is a very old movement, and you have a lot of experience behind you in terms of how to run a democratic enterprise. And learning was mentioned by several speakers before. Is there still something which the cooperatives can learn, or you are happy to explain the potential in the cooperative movement to democratize workplaces and economic decision making, and what you expect in terms of support from the next political cycle in the EU.
Thank you, László. Indeed, we are an old movement, but I believe still quite modern and innovative, because I will come back to that later. As we can see, cooperatives are able to react to many new trends and new challenges that appears in society, and we certainly have a lot to learn, of course, and also to share what we learned from this long experience, and this also the fact that that new cooperatives, new type of cooperatives are born nowadays is also a way to learn and transform ourselves. But just to clarify, indeed, I represent CECOP. CECOP is the European Confederation representing cooperatives in industry and services, and the majority of our cooperatives are worker cooperatives, so cooperatives owned and controlled by workers. And I'm very glad to be part of this discussion today, because for us, economic democracy is part of our DNA. But beyond just those slogans, I would like just to take a few minutes to explain how do we in worker cooperatives, what's the meaning of democracy? What is our meaning of democracy when we talk about economic democracy? There are in Europe other type of enterprises that are also based on employee ownership, not only co-ops, of course, but we see that in many of those enterprises, workers' financial participation is not always paired with ownership. It's very often sees as a financial incentive, as a motivation for a worker, while for us in worker cooperatives, workers' financial participation goes with ownership, and so when you're a worker member, you are a co-owner of the shared enterprise, and this automatically you also take part in strategic decisions of the enterprise. So this is also how we see democracy at workplace. And in worker cooperatives, what is interesting is that democracy is protected, enshrined also in most of the legislation regulating worker cooperatives across Europe. It was mentioned before, in worker cooperatives, we have this equal principle, one member equal one vote. So no matter the financial share you put in the cooperative, your voice will always have the same power as another cooperative member. Even when external capital is allowed in the worker cooperative, this is with limited or no voting rights in order to protect the workers' ownership of the cooperative. So this is also a very important element. And we even go further in worker cooperatives also to limit, I would say, purely or solely optimistic behavior. So members are not motivated only by financial reasons to become members of the cooperative, because in a cooperative there is no or very limited redistribution of benefits of surpluses to the cooperative members. Even in case of dissolution, if a cooperative closed down, you cannot distribute if there are remaining assets among present members. It goes to other solidaristic cooperative funds. So this is interesting. So for us, I mean, this is how we align work with, and I use the concept that was used by one of the speakers before, I think Martin, voice, power, and control. So this is how we align those principles. So indeed, cooperatives are a more than 100 years old model, and the format didn't really change through this century. So this is that's the interesting part. And today, CECOP affiliates more or less 43,000 cooperatives across Europe. I said majority of them are worker cooperatives, but not only. I will come back to that later. And they're active in various sectors: manufacturing, construction, services, care, creative industries, IT, etc. Majority of them are SMEs. We heard about Mondragon, of course. It's a proud example in our network, but it's also important to underline the majority are SMEs. But indeed, there are also some bigger cooperatives. So there's also a whole discussion international with scale that we don't have time to address now. And some of the cooperatives are also almost 100 years old. So we have also a long approved longevity. What is also interesting with this old 100 years old model is that we see that the formula is still used today to, as I said before, to react to new work and employment trends. So there is a rise, for example, in Europe of cooperatives among freelancers, or cooperatives among self-employed, or platform cooperatives, worker-owned platform cooperatives. And so this is very interesting to see that a bit, so the cooperative model is still used as it was used 100 years ago, always to secure the working condition, to mutualize risks and costs among workers through values of solidarity and participation. I would also like here to give another example that was not discussed before. We heard a lot about worker cooperatives, but also to talk about the rising number of multi-stakeholder cooperatives providing public services of general interest across Europe. And I think in this debate today, it's interesting to say their contribution to democratizing public services. How do they do that? Through community ownership and community organization of public services. So there are various examples of community cooperatives or multi-stakeholder cooperatives in the energy sector, care sector, transport, water, as well, housing, and also some new areas where we see those cooperatives appearing, like such as digital spaces. Very often they are multi-stakeholder cooperatives, so difference with worker cooperatives. They include in the governance different categories of stakeholder: workers, who deliver the service in the service sector, for example, the service users, but also the community, other civil society members, NGOs, other cooperatives, or also public authorities, municipalities, etc. So this is a very interesting tool for the provision of service of general interest, since it's the way to preserve the general interest part of this service. But of course, we also see here a risk. There's also a risk to see cooperatives or community as a substitute to state financing or privatization of services. So we have to be careful here and not to see cooperatives instrumentalized for this purpose, but really to see them as a grassroots creative. I like there's a speaker who spoke about creation before, innovative creation tool for democratization of public service through community ownership, where community is involved from the design until the delivery of the service, but also for example, in the fixing the price of the service. So, and what is interesting as well is that most of those examples, they're not just examples of how community come to compensate lack of public service in rural or remote areas, but also we see very great examples how community brings progressive responses to some current challenges, such as, for example, cooperatives providing renewable energy solutions, sustainable mobility, sustainable tourism, preserving natural resources, etc. So here as well, there's a huge but also untapped potential that we could see growing through European Union. Just to come back to the question of democratizing the workplace, which is a dear topic for us, another huge but untapped potential that was mentioned one of the speakers before is the workers' buyout. Yeah, short. Okay, so it was discussed before, but I just would like to underline how this is also one of the policy areas that deserves a better promotion at European and national level, because here we're talking about saving jobs, but also not just saving jobs for workers, but also giving them the control over the means of production. Now, to just finish, to come back to the European policies, we had this chat before. I mean, we have to be honest, we're not going to have a commissioner in charge of economic democracy. We're not going to have a unit in the Commission dealing with economic democracy. So we really have to be strategic and see how to join forces with progressive actors and how to mainstream and integrate economic democracy in various policy areas, such as taxation, state aid, just to mention some, but also entrepreneurship policies. We have a whole list but we don't have time, or what we ask or request from the European institutions, or how to better empower cooperatives in achieving a more democracy at workplace or democratizing public services. I invite you also to read our manifesto on our website, and if I have time later on, I will be happy to comment.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm sure you are ready to face the next persons responsible for the portfolio or portfolios, and not only the previous ones. Look, the time is really flying. We heard a lot. My suggestion is this, if you want to respect the time limit of this conference, that I open the floor now for very, very quick questions, not commentary, not long remarks, but if members of the audience have short questions to the panelists, maybe I can invite 3 and then give the floor back to the panelists in order to respond to what they heard, questions or each other's comments. So, 3, 2, 1. In that case, I ask the panelists, do you have questions to each other? Yeah, there we...
Okay.
Yeah, but just a quick provocative question. Tomorrow, it looks like in the UK, there'll be a new Labour government. I mean, how new Labour it will be, we don't know. But perhaps people could address the question of how would you what would you use as a sort of slogan or policy or something to shift that government towards a more social economy, democratic model than it seems to be about to adopt?
Might be a question to me.
It was a very short one, and I would like to address to Ruth, because you talk about the definition of social economy. As far as I know, in the sector of the social economy, at least in Spain and especially in the Basque Country, they were quite worried about this definition, because some of them think that it could open like social washing to some kind of companies, instead of going to social responsibility of the companies, which is the normal way till now that they used to do those things. No? So I would like to know why you reached to that point, and if you can ensure that it's not going to be a washing of companies using that term. Thank you.
Ruth, why don't you start this closing circle then? If I notice any urgent questions, I will intervene. But would you please start? And then I give the floor to our panelists to take another minute or 2.
Thank you. Well, for us, we had to find a definition that can go for 27 countries. 28 perhaps. So from that point of view, it has to be relatively wide. I think that is why it is relatively wide. And I personally do not think there is a risk of let's say, social washing, but it is indeed, it covers also cooperatives or I mean, we didn't go into the legal form, because this would be a big debate, and that is why we just focused on principles, you know, on principles, and we think it can work. The goal, as I said, the main goal that we have is to, and this links also a bit to the question of the UK, is about expanding the model in countries which have very little social economy enterprises, and therefore, so that's why it was important to have principles, and also important to have examples of how it's working in other countries. That's it. Thank you.
Who would like to be next? Graça, would you like to continue?
Yeah, just a comment. I don't know what you say to the English after tomorrow. I hope it's, of course, a big win of the Labour. At least it's my preference, of course. But what I think is, in general, our countries are facing, we talked about that, the rise of populism and right-wing extremism. Portugal, for the first time in 50 years, as a group of 50 MPs of a right-wing party. So we never had it. Now we have it. So we are in the club now. And what I feel is that people really felt abandoned in the last years. I feel this in Portugal. I feel this in several countries. We were talking about that during lunchtime. And people really feel abandoned in many places of our countries. And we need to understand, in my opinion, that our biggest deficit is not only the financial deficit, it's really the trust deficit. And if we don't face that with courage and with some really assertive measures, I think we'll lose it, and I think democracy will lose it, and democracy will just be something very wishful thinking, and will not manage to do it. So I think we need to build trust, we need to bring people more close to us, and we need to make them understand that there are some decisions that are good decisions for the future, and others not so much.
Thank you very much. So there are many regions in Europe which, so to speak, feel left behind. And if people feel that they are excluded from the economic prosperity, indeed the political consequences are so visible, as in Portugal, but also in many other countries, which also goes back to cohesion, which we discussed before. So some kind of link between the cohesion policy and the possibility to promote a social economy and participation is indeed one of the very important lessons. Who is next?
No, I want to pick up on your point on cohesion, because I think that the key point is indeed to create good conditions on the place. I mean, very local, territorial-based, place-based policies, and the social economy has a participatory economy has this as its very important characteristic, and that is the way to address the issue of people being left behind, which is also linked to deindustrialization, globalization, I mean, and things like that. So it is a way to get back to place-based policies and growth, also linked to the territory, and that's also why cohesion policy is important.
Thanks for confirming this, because it's important that the Commission sticks to this. Diana?
If I'm... Sorry. I just wanted to quote a work of a French researcher, Thomas Coutreau, who did some research, who demonstrated that workers who face at workplace less autonomy and more authoritarian practices, they have the tendency to vote more at extreme right and less democratic parties. So I think this is a super interesting work for anyone who needs still to be convinced that democracy at work is also a way to preserve our democracy. So I think that's just something I wanted to share.
Thank you. Idoia? One minute for another question.
Yeah, just one remark, if you allow. I think we have heard a lot of very good principles on what is social economy and democracy at workplace. I'm living now in Germany, have left Brussels. We should not forget that also in trade union movement and also in the social economy sector, the right wing and fascists are very present. And they try to occupy the territory, because if you say left behind, this means also that people felt left behind and then use this space. And in particular, they can use of an opportunity if the focus is too much only on social business and competition and not on the solidarity aspect of social economy. And this, sorry for, it's not a question, but just a remark, and perhaps to draw attention that there is no automatism.
It's indeed a very important remark, and indeed colleagues from the trade unions are also here, so we needed to follow up definitely on these political aspects. Idoia, anything to add?
Well, just think about how it's going to be the next 5 years here in the European Parliament with the new majority, and well, my aim is to be ambitious, to fulfill all the social items, but I'm realistic, so I think that we are going to share more this kind of workshops and talks to be able to do agreements with other political forces just to go ahead with the political agenda, because it's really important for the democracy. Thank you.
You have plenty of time to be realistic, and you should leave it to the Commission. I think you should be ambitious, first of all, and demand the Commission to deliver. Oliver, the final statement is yours.
Thank you very much, László. Maybe one word to Mr. Cumbers about our advice to the UK colleagues. I would say maybe the best thing is if Europe doesn't give public advices at the moment. I trust the new government will take a good path, I think, for also for economic democracy in UK. But let's wait for the result of the elections. But it's also important I think, to say that we here in the House, we keep strong relations also with civil society and unions and social partners in UK. Could see especially in Scotland, but also in other regions, they were absolutely interested in this, and we even signed a memorandum of understanding with them to show that they are not any third country for us, but they are, let's see, part of the family, and we will see how we can then manage the relationships in the medium term. But coming back to 2 points I wanted to mention, because I think I'm one of the few who did not speak about social economy, but this is only because I know there was also Giuseppe Guerini here, who's one of the, I would say, main proponents of social economy in our House. Just to underline again that the EESC was always a promoter for social economy. We had even a specific group on this who pushed especially for the action plan, for a dedicated action plan on social economy, and we got this in the end. And I had also the pleasure to see firsthand in Mondragon about this experience. Was really amazing. I have to say it's not the same in all countries. Coming from Austria, social economy is something totally different there, but I think we can learn from this for sure. And this brings me to the point that some colleagues and also Connie mentioned. I think democracy at work, democracy in our society, and participation at the highest level is not a guarantee against right-wing and populists. We could see the same with young people. We involved young people. Now we could see that many of them tended to vote for extreme right parties. So it's not about better or not better, young or old, but I think there's no alternative to this, I would say, overall stronger participation. Because what we can see in countries like, I think, Germany and also Austria, that companies where workers benefit from more democratic structures, from collective bargaining, from a works council, here we have clear evidence that they tend less to vote for extremists and for right-wing. Once again, it's not a guarantee, but less. And I think this should be an important lesson to move forward with this idea. And to finish, László mentioned the upcoming Hungarian presidency, but also the Spanish presidency. And I think it was a major move forward that the Spanish presidency took this initiative for more democracy at work. I know that also our trade union colleagues had some reservations against this model, but I think we should continue, and also Europe can give here somehow a framework in the future for this. And coming back to the Hungarian presidency, I just can say that we know that there are not so many dossiers, open dossiers at the moment, but we try as EESC to take a professional approach. I think I can say that we also consulted a lot of colleagues in Hungary, including you, László, how to deal with this. But I have to say, at a professional level, we got some requests for exploratory opinions, and we will deliver on this. And we'll definitely, if we have contacts and if we go to Hungary, and we went already there with our bureau, then we will not restrict our contacts to the government, but we will always meet civil society. And that was even my first contact. I met the mayor and the vice mayor of Budapest and civil society, independent civil society organizations. I think this should be the way, and then let's see what's going out. But coming out. But the Hungarian presidency is also part of the trio presidency. So I think in the end, I hope we can have a positive result of the three presidencies that were part of this trio presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all the panelists and the participants. I think this has been an extremely rich discussion today, in the morning and also in the afternoon. And we all go home with having learned a lot of lessons. Learning itself, I think, was stressed by many speakers. The importance of being open to innovate and look for new solutions. But at the same time, I think the other lesson is that this is a broad agenda. When we speak about economic democracy, it's about participation in decision-making at the workplace, but also ownership to some extent, improving and deepening the social dialogue, improving how we decide on public budgets at city level or also at the national level, sometimes reorganizing finance and increasing the public role in the financial sector. So there are many, many elements on which we could work jointly, with the understanding indeed of the political dimensions, which I don't want to elaborate on now because there were several comments on this. If I'm not mistaken, indeed it was one of the patterns of this recent European Parliament elections that there was a right-wing leaning of many young people, especially young men. If you look at the new French results, there is a silver lining because there is a youth bias towards the National Front, which for many of us would be very interesting new phenomenon to look at, and why exactly, what kind of social and economic ideas play a role in increasing the appetite of the young generation to be more progressive. So thank you again. And apart from the panelists and the audience, I also would like to thank the FEPS team. Anna Kolesnichenko was masterminding and preparing much of the activities and the panels. Our colleague David Rinaldi cannot be here today, but Vanessa Zwiesele was also helping with the organization, and there are 3 further colleagues here from the FEPS team, Ifa and Luis and Matis. We're also helping to ensure that you find it comfortable and also very rewarding to spend your time, despite July, despite summer, despite a lot of attention to the gossips of the new European Parliament and nominations and group formations in the European Parliament. I'm sure all that is also very interesting. But I think for all of us, what connects is this agenda, the shared interest in the idea of the economic democracy, and hopefully also in the practice of it. Thank you.